I would be remiss not to acknowledge that we are in NF Awareness Month. It is May. There is a lot of really exciting stuff going on right now all over the country. So if you're not following CTF on our social media, sign up for our newsletter. I suggest you do those things to hear the latest updates and hear some really encouraging stories coming out of the NF community. Also dropping a link in the chat to the May Awareness Kit. This is a great way. It's a downloadable kit with tons of different options for how you can get involved and how you can get connected to the work that we're doing and to the community that's here. So really excited to have everyone here. So I'm very pleased now to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Ethan Lester is a clinical psychologist at Mass General Brigham and an assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He has many, many years of experience working across neurology, ophthalmology, rehabilitation, and psychiatry, and in particular, a long time part as a researcher of this NF community. We all love Dr. Lester, and we're happy he's here. He brings a compassionate and whole person perspective to this really important topic. So happy to have you, Dr. Lester, and I will hand things over to you.
Delighted. Thank you so much, Kate. And as always, such a pleasure to be joining everyone here for such a lovely occasion. NF Awareness Month, obviously, but this webinar is a very, I think, appropriate topic for a lot of people in this community. We're all trying to find ways of getting connected. So let me get to my PowerPoint really quickly. All right. And I'm going to hit play. Looks like we're all set. So my talk today is called From Isolation to Empowerment, Building Hope, Resilience, and Community in neurofibromatosis. So as Kate said, I'm a psychologist at Mass General in Boston. I'm actually calling in today from my basement office. So yeah, it's great to see some of the weather changing, although I have just a small window to look through here. Um, so we'll get started. This is a webinar, so a lot of the comments and questions you'll post in the chat, and we'll be able to address those at the end. And I look forward to answering your questions at the end of today's talk. With any professional talk, just quickly to acknowledge any conflicts of interest or disclosures to make. I don't have any specific, but my work over the years, as Kate mentioned, has been generously funded by the Children's Tumor Foundation, as well as these three regional organizations for NF as well. So no disclosures or COIs to make here. So, all right, I'm going to ask a very simple question. Why are we here? Jokes aside, I know it's not a simple question. And you may be looking at this picture and you say, wait a second, I think I'd maybe have seen this picture before. And if you have, it's because this photo is actually captured on April 6th, about 6:41 p.m. Eastern time from the Artemis II crew. These astronauts were, as you can see right at the bottom, it's a little dark, but you see the moon and you see the Earth. And this vantage point is one that has almost never been captured by any human eye, and for that matter, camera is pretty rare too. It's a crescent of our planet, and I wanted to bring up something about the why we're here, and really this anecdote or this story about the astronauts. I don't know if you felt this way, but when I was listening to the stories about these astronauts, I was listening to when they came back to Earth, but also while they were out in space, just the way they talked about Earth. There was this great podcast interview, which I loved because I have a young child, that they asked these young children to call into their show and ask the astronauts questions. And as you can imagine, most of them were about food and the bathroom. But one of the questions that came up from these children interviewing these astronauts who came back from this mission was, how did you feel when you were that far away from Earth? Was it lonely? And Victor Glover, who was one of the astronauts, he was kind of known as like the poetic one. He said, I didn't feel lonely, but I felt a longing for Earth. It's all the people I love. It's Shakespeare. He was down there. It's everything, right? Everything that we know. And so he said, when you get up there in space, and you see and you look around, there's a lot of nothing. Space is empty, he said. There's no air, there's a lot of nothing. And you go, wow, if all of these things that we know, even in the spacecraft that we're hanging out in, were built on Earth, this infinitesimally small piece of the universe, that's pretty miraculous. It's a special thing, even though it's small. And another astronaut that they had actually had also answered this question. He acknowledged that he was kind of getting off topic a little bit, but I want you to look at this picture really quick. Um, I would I would ask if anybody knows what this picture is of, other than Earth. It's pretty obviously our beautiful blue planet. Um, but one of the astronauts, when asked this question, "Did you feel lonely?" He felt like he got a little off topic, but I thought it was a very profound statement he made. He said, "I don't know if this will relate, but if you look at the crescent moon, it's rounded and it slopes when the sun goes to its shadow. But if you look at a crescent Earth, the same thing happens from their vantage point looking at Earth. But the edge of the Earth, just as it extends out just a little bit longer, and you realize that that extension right there, it's tiny. It's like two little whiskers, that little red thing that was circled in that picture. It's the whole atmosphere. It's everything that keeps us alive." And what he said, this astronaut, he said, you really get the sense of fragility. You get the sense of such a special little tiny thing right here, that atmosphere. And when you put those things next to each other, the thing that enables us to live here together being so tiny, but so important, he said it's hard to, or even impossible, he said, to rationalize in your mind. And I thought that was such an amazing thing to notice as astronauts. You know, they're out in space, they're the first humans to do this thing that they're doing. And the thing that they look at the most and are most amazed by is our planet, our beautiful planet where we all live together. And I loved every minute of it. I didn't think I was like a space guy. I think a lot of people discovered their, inklings towards space on different missions and whatnot. But this was a moment for me. I was like, wow, I really think this is so amazing. And the amazing piece of it is the humanity. And so instead of asking, why are we here? I want to give us a reason for why we're here. NF, I get this quote from NF Midwest, and in fact, I usually wear a suit to these webinars, but since it's NF Awareness Month, I decided to wear my "Nobody Fights Alone" neurofibromatosis T-shirt that I got from a conference out in Chicago when I was talking to NF Midwest. Nobody fights alone with NF. That's why we're here. And this is how you fight isolation. This is how you empower people to stay resilient, is having that almost like a battle cry that we're all here together and we're all here doing this together. And together we can make a difference when we have a plan, when we can talk with one another, when we can strategize and empower one another. This is our opportunity. And again, I feel so honored to be here during NF Awareness Month. And I have a family friend who is hosting their own walk this Sunday that I'll be attending. And then in July, I'll be out at the summit. So I hope to see some of you all there too. So that's a little bit for an introduction. I know that's not necessarily why we're here. You didn't sign up for a space camp with Dr. Lester, but I do hope that story can help put a few things about the human experience into perspective as it did for me. Um, all right. So a little bit of level setting. Obviously, I'm very grateful. Usually have to explain what NF is to a lot of my non-NF audiences, but this isn't the case this time. I'll basically just make this quick. So as you know, there's three distinct types of NFs. There's NF1, NF2 related schwannomatosis, and schwannomatosis. And for the sake of time, I won't go into the details of how these are different. But we can just say in this order, they tend to be most common to most rare, although all of these are, as they say, the most common rare disease you've maybe never heard of. That's the tagline for NF. When we talk about NF and mental health, number one, any kind of chronic illness, doesn't matter if it's diabetes, if it's cancer, NF, any kind of chronic illness, just from a biological and physiological level, has some level of stress. And stress isn't just a state of mind, it's a body sense as well. It's actually often it's a biological process that helps us respond to threat in our environment. So stress isn't always a bad thing. It's in many cases, what keeps us alive. But if you have chronic illness, there's almost a one-to-one relationship with a body sense of chronic stress. And with NF, mental health challenges are quite common. In fact, about 46% of adults with neurofibromatosis have at least one additional psychiatric co-occurring diagnosis. And most commonly, these are mood and anxiety disorders in particular. People with NF also report significantly higher rates of loneliness, anxiety, as I said, depression, social isolation compared to those in the general population. And many people with NF describe this feeling different, misunderstood, judged, not just for physical symptoms, but also some of the uncertainties around the condition and the challenges that one faces when living with NF. The research, and I don't want to bum everybody out because there's kind of a light at the end of this tunnel, but just to get through a bit of this, the research also suggests that people with NF show poorer quality of life scores and emotional well-being, social functioning, and daily activities. And that research was specifically in NF1. And then visible neurofibromas, body image concerns are also strongly linked to a person's sense of lower self-esteem, as well as likelihood of social withdrawal and overall distress. Um, Many patients feel they report feeling isolated because they don't often feel fully understood in their lived experience with NF. And in fact, it's not just isolated or misunderstood by others, it's also by people like family members, friends, even their healthcare providers. That feeling of misunderstanding is quite common with NF. And then emotional distress, just broadly speaking, can worsen during periods of disease progression or worsening. And this can, again, promote that sense of isolation and uncertainty about the future. And yet, despite these issues, what this says here, for many individuals living with NF, the psychological and social burden of the disease can be as life-altering as the physical symptoms themselves. And yet, despite these challenges, connection, peer support, psychological care, and resilience-focused interventions can help improve one's coping, one's sense of hope, one's sense of social connection, and overall quality of life. So it's not a hopeless cause. It's not all lost. It's important to get through the tough stuff, but to give you a sense of encouragement that there is hope. So I just used the term resiliency, kind of one and the same there. I would typically ask who in the audience knows what this term resiliency means. And about a decade ago, if I would ask this question, maybe 2 or 3 hands go up. And now I think just given popular psychology and kind of our understanding of mental health broadly, I think that a lot of that changed after the pandemic. We know what resiliency is. And even if we don't have the definition of it, we know it when we see it. Um, Resiliency, as a psychologist defines it, is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And you may look at that list: adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats. Any of those could fall into potentially a category of a medical illness, and in particular, NF-related challenges. And what I typically like to say to my patients and my clients with NF is, by your very nature, living with NF means that you're resilient. I mean, there's just, even if you don't feel like a resilient person in mind, embody the fact that you're here, the fact that you're continuing to move forward is a sign of resilience. This is often a very popular photo. This is a succulent, but sometimes it's like a weed growing out of the asphalt. But we think about the organism with resilience. It's this response to a relatively challenging environment, and yet people still find ways of adapting. Okay. So we spent a little bit of time on resilience. Now we'll talk about what it is in practice. So resilience is that ability to bounce back from setbacks. It's that ability to adapt, as I said. But importantly, it's a skill that can be learned. And specifically through psychosocial and psychological interventions, including things like counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, resilience-focused interventions, this can actually help patients cope with uncertainty, body image concerns, stigma, chronic disease associated with NF. And we've taught some of these skills in our mind-body program. for people with NF. As Kate said, when I started my training as a psychologist, I was involved in a large clinical trial at Mass General where I was the study clinician working with patients who had NF, and I like to say it was a virtual trial before virtual was a thing. 2018, people didn't even know what Zoom was, but we were using it, and it was working quite well for our patients. But in this program, we taught skills like the relaxation response, mindfulness, coping, social support, self-efficacy, gratitude, optimism. These skills that, with the right training and the right mindset, can be learned. And so these two rhetorical questions here I want to ask are, how can you stay resilient with NF? And how do personal and interpersonal skills help with staying resilient? And I get that the title of my talk today is talking about isolation and connection and empowerment, and those are all such important components of the NF experience. And I think you can remember that what I just talked about with mental health is by its very nature, a lot of these challenges with NF tend to be quite socially limiting and cause people to feel that sense of social withdrawal and isolation. So, really, before we can get on that walk or that run, we got to first put the shoes on first, is what I say, is, to be able to even start engaging with other people, we have to have the skills, as our fellow astronaut friends had out in outer space, clicking away. This is actually in a training module, I think. They're not in space in this scene, but um, you got to have the skills to be able to even start that process of engagement socially. Um, you can probably see that on your worst days, the last thing you want to do would be talk to somebody or hear about somebody else's challenges. And it's that old kind of adage that you hear. It got very popular in the pandemic, but being able to put your own oxygen mask on before trying to help someone else with theirs. And this is essentially what we'll be doing first in our webinar today. So we're going to talk about the skills now. I mentioned a few from the resiliency program that we offered people with NF. And so I'm going to start with the basic skill of relaxation. And you may say, how in the world is relaxation going to help me deal with my NF? And I think it's a fair question. Um, what we're really getting at with a practice of relaxation is retraining a mind-body connection. Essentially, this is a way of helping the mind. This is the way of the mind helping the body regulate and the body helping the mind do the same. So it's a bidirectional relationship between how we think affects how our body feels and how our body feels affecting how we're thinking. And if you think about NF, you're in a constant state of stress. Potentially, you might have chronic pain, you may have symptoms, you may have uncertainties, etc. And the ability to retrain the brain and the body in such a way that that detection or that fear of threat from the body affecting how you think and vice versa, relaxation skills can actually help you try and calm down that sympathetic nervous system, that tendency to immediately get into a fight or flight mode. If we had more time, I would spend an entire hour talking about that relaxation response and that fight or flight response we have during a stress response. But for the sake of practice today, one of the first skills I'm going to work with you today on is a breathing skill called box breathing. And this is actually a skill that we use almost universally across the board in terms of our stress management strategies. Uh, it's kind of funny because if you told me, Ethan, you're going to go to school for 7 years and you're going to do a doctoral internship and postdoc and you're going to do research and become a psychologist and you're going to be teaching people how to breathe, I would have thought, well, okay. Not exactly what I was thinking as a psychologist, but you'd be surprised how much our basic biological functioning, our ability to get good sleep, eat nutritiously, relax, how much that affects our thinking and our feeling. So we're going to practice breathing together, and I'll even give you some homework at the end of this that you'll need to continue breathing um, to stay alive, obviously. But this ability to do this relaxation practice will be important. So there's going to be a graphic. It's what the kids call a GIF, I believe. It's a moving graphic, and we're going to do the breathing exercise together. So it's going to start, and we're going to watch it go all the way around one time. So you would inhale roughly about 4 counts, hold your breath for about 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and then hold again at the exhale for 4 counts. Ready? Go. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. Breathe in, hold. Yep. Inhale. Sorry, I cut off. Hold. Exhale. Breathe in one more time. Hold. Exhale. All right. I'm going to pull that off the screen so we're not focused on our breathing for the next couple minutes while I talk. The most important thing in a relaxation practice, I think number one is to just take that opportunity to connect with the body, to feel what the body feels like in that given moment. And the second thing is to try and not overthink the exercise. It's really not so important that you breathe in so deeply that you fill your lungs entirely, or that you hold for a specific amount of time, or that you exhale just the right way. These are the questions I get in a lot of the interventions. People want to get very specific about the skill. And what I want to tell people is it's more about how you feel rather than what we're telling you to do. So at the end of the exercise, if you're like me, you might have felt your shoulders drop a little bit. You might have felt a little bit more present in your body. You might have noticed that when you breathed in, you had like a jaggedness in your breathing. Maybe that's indicating, a sense of feeling a little bit uncomfortable or a little uncertain. Anything you feel is fine. A lot of the relaxation practice, believe it or not, is not about changing the way you feel, but just getting into a new frame of mind, of being able to take yourself out of a given moment that you're feeling stress and to focus on something even as simple as your breathing to help you get through a moment of stress. So that's relaxation. And till I was blue in the face, when I was in grad school, I had I had some really great mentors, but one of my main mentors, our lab was studying this concept of mindfulness. And in the past decade, mindfulness from the scientific literature has grown, I think, like tenfold. Like the number of publications, the number of interventions that are mindfulness based. To the extent that it was funny, a couple of years ago, I was telling my dad on the phone, who's reaching 70. He said, I was telling him I think I was stressed about work or something, and he said to me, "Have you tried mindfulness? Have you tried meditation?" And this skill, not of relaxing, because relaxing, like I'm gonna say now, relaxing is very different in its core philosophy than what we see as mindfulness. You can relax and still be very not mindful. I mean, there's plenty of people who do that with, video games and going for a walk where they're daydreaming. But mindfulness is literally the practice of being present in a given moment with your thoughts, your feelings, sensations, physical or otherwise. And it's about being in this moment. And you may say, well, how is that a skill that's going to help me be resilient? Like this moment is very hard. This moment is, filled with pain. It's filled with loneliness. The problem when we're not being mindful is that we're either living in the past or we're living in the future. And the past, as they say, is a memory, and the future is a fantasy. The only thing you have is this moment happening right now. And just as importantly, from my perspective as a psychologist, behavior change can't happen in any other moment than in the present. We can't change the past. We don't know the future. So when we can bring our attention to this moment and we could train our mind and our body to be present and to not get too caught up in certain things like our thoughts and our feelings, but to just watch these things come and go and to be present with them as they arrive and visit and leave and come back. Um, that promotes a different kind of approach to life that allows you to be more flexible. It allows you to be more intentional in your relationships. And when you're talking about things like social isolation and connection, there's only one experience worse than being lonely, and it's being with people but feeling alone. And I find that many of my patients who are quite depressed, even when they have family, even when they have loving spouses and care partners, there's that feeling of just not really being there. And so mindfulness is this way of really priming all of those intentions around being present and not letting your thoughts and your feelings and your pain and all these other issues get in the way. So we're going to do another quick skill, mindfulness skill. It's this wonderful little exercise called Leaves on a Stream. If you've ever been in therapy, maybe your therapist has said this to you before. If you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to just take a quick look at this graphic, get a picture of this stream in your mind, and then I'd like when you're ready to just close your eyes for a moment. And if you're using the captions, just focus your attention on the words at the bottom of the screen. Before we even move forward with the mindfulness exercise, just get a sense of your body in space and in time. Sometimes you can notice the points of contact, your bottom on the chair, your feet on the floor. Sometimes it's where your clothes touches parts of your body, just becoming aware of the body as a whole. No need to change your breathing, but just notice it. Notice the in-breath, notice the out-breath, natural. And in this exercise, I'm going to give you a little metaphor to play with. You're at this beautiful stream, you're sitting at its stream side at the bank of this stream, and a light, perfect leaf falls gently onto this stream. And you watch this leaf as it comes down the stream. The water's not moving too fast or too slow, and the leaf just glides down the stream, down to the end where you can no longer see it. And again, sitting at the bank of this stream, just allowing another leaf to naturally fall in its own time. You can notice the color of it. You can notice the shape of it. You can notice the speed by which it's falling. But just be present in this exercise, following this leaf as it floats down to the stream and begins to move down the current of the stream. Keeping this going for just another moment, allow another leaf to fall in its own time. Again, observing it in any way you choose. As it gently goes down the stream. And now this first leaf that we are about to see in this new part of the exercise, this leaf has something on it. It has a thought, or it has a feeling, or a sensation. It may be pain. It may be, I'm not good enough. It may be something as heavy as I'm not lovable, or I don't like myself, or I don't like the way I look, or the way I feel. And this leaf floats down to the stream naturally, no resistance, lands on the stream. And watch this leaf that has that writing on it, or that image on it, or sensation. Watch as this leaf too floats by, floats down the stream, floats out of sight. And another leaf may drop, or another leaf may not. But as this exercise goes on, notice that these thoughts that we have, these sensations that we have, can show up, they can land, they can drift away, and they'll come back and they'll land, and they'll drift away again. And it may be the same thought, it may be the same feeling, the same sensation, and whatever it is, feeling that distance and that flexibility of being able to witness your thoughts like leaves on a stream, allowing these experiences to float through that stream of consciousness without having to be too wrapped up with it, without having to become too attached to any of it. Take another 20 or so seconds with this exercise. If any other leaves fall down to your stream, notice what they say, how they feel, what they look like, and allow them to drift away. All right, welcome back. Uh, Now, this is, obviously something I did go to school for. So our imaginations are very powerful. And, spend any time with a 2 or a 3-year-old and you'll see all the things they can be, all the superheroes and police officers and all these things that they imagine. As you get older, our imagination tends to go more towards worry and anticipation and anxiety, but our imagination, our mind, our ability to create these things can actually be the thing that helps us deal with really strong mental and emotional experiences. And mindfulness is one way to help you become a bit more in touch with those feelings without having to take them so intensely. Mindfulness is just another way of being able to make that pivot in your life. Just quickly, there are times where our thoughts are a bit trickier than a leaf on a stream. If anybody deals with chronic pain, it's possible that that same leaf just kept falling on that stream, and you're like, all right, there it goes down the stream. There's another one. There's two. There's five. Now it's the whole stream filled with this. Um, and there are times where the things that we want to change are out of our control. We've tried all of the nerve blockers. We've tried the muscle relaxers. We've, tried hypnotherapy and psychotherapy and physical therapy. Sometimes the only skill to practice in a time where things are not amenable to change is a skill of acceptance. And there's a concept called radical acceptance. Fun fact, the word radical comes from the Latin root of the word like radish, radical. And when we get to the root of acceptance, it's taking life on life's terms. It's not trying to change what's already here because pain, NF, loneliness, it's here. It's different than saying, yeah, okay, fine, I like this or I want this. It's not that. It's just not needing to treat it as a problem every time. And the metaphor I use sometimes with acceptance is many times we're in this tug of war with our mind. Our mind is telling us this thing, and we're pulling back and saying, no, it's this thing, not this thing. And when we find out that we don't have to play this game with our minds, with our thinking or our feeling, we get this feeling that we can just drop the rope, that we don't have to play this game of tug of war. We can let go. We can stop the struggle of trying to change things that are already here. So acceptance is another skill that I typically teach to help people prepare for some of the social support and empowering connection with other people. And the last thing before we get into that social support component of the uh, of the resiliency work that we teach in some of our programs is adaptive thinking. And you may think, right, yeah, how are you going to get me to think differently? I've been thinking this way all my life. And I think it's a misunderstanding. I think when people hear adaptive thinking, they're thinking positive thinking. They're thinking that if I just can change my thinking, I'll feel better. And I don't actually even know if that's possible. Um, I think there are ways we can practice adaptive thinking to help us get to a better frame of mind, but my goal as a psychologist when I'm working with my patients is to not, I'm not trying to get you to believe something that you don't believe. I'm not trying to convince you of something that isn't real or true. What I am trying to do is give you enough space to think about certain things, not so that you think about them inaccurately, but that you just think about them with some level of helpfulness. That when we think about, let's take a social situation, for example, the thought that a person may have, nobody likes me. Okay. Now that's a pretty negative thought, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, that's definitely a thought that people have in social situations where they may feel socially anxious or, may have significant concerns about being bullied or their physical appearance. And I'm not trying to get you to think differently necessarily in those situations. But what I am trying to get you to do is see how that thought, nobody likes me, doesn't make it any easier to be in that situation. It's not helpful at the very least. That if I walk into a party and my first thought is nobody likes me, it's going to be really hard to try and connect with people if in the back of my head I have this thought, nobody likes me. Or let's take the social situation out of it for a second. Let's think about pain, which is common with NF. One of the thoughts I hear often, a negative thought I hear often with NF is I will be in pain for the rest of my life and it will be this intense. Maybe they don't add that last part, but that's kind of what's implied is like my life is over. I can't deal with this pain. I'm going to feel this way forever. Now, I'm not trying to challenge and say that your pain is going to magically go away or you're even going to feel better in the next day or week or month or whatever. But what I am trying to get my patients to do in those moments for adaptive thinking is to try and take the emotional stakes down a little bit. And by doing that, I try and have them challenge some of their thinking to be able to say something like, how do you know that you'll feel this way for the rest of your life? What do you think you might be doing in this moment that is unhelpful for your thinking? Yeah, they might be trying to predict the future. They may be thinking all or none. I either will always have pain or I'm never going to have pain. The pain might feel very personal. If you go to a doctor and they can't help you when they say that's you've tried everything. That feeling of nobody can help me. Um, to try and take the emotional component of that out a little bit and be able to say, in this particular situation, I met my doctor's limits of where he could be helpful. And that doesn't mean I'm never going to get help again. It just means today I was not able to get the help that I felt like I needed. Even that kind of thinking is more adaptive than some of the really strong negative thinking that happens. And again, in social settings, right? Like if you've had a significant history of loneliness, depression, bullying, judgment, family history. Don't even get me started on family history. It's what we call the deep end of the pool. But, we carry around these messages from the world around us. And some of those thoughts we have, it's not that they, it's not that they're untrue, because some of them might be true. You might be significantly concerned about how other people view you based on the bullying you've experienced or the family you come from. But the truth of the matter is not what I'm concerned about. It's about how helpful it is, those thoughts coming up every time you're trying to have a new experience with somebody else. And in those moments, it is more of a strengths focused way of thinking. Adaptive thinking is not positive thinking, it's resilient thinking. It's a way of trying to include some of the things that are working for you right now. Like I'm in pain and I'm able to walk on my own. Or I may have hearing challenges and I'm still able to participate in this webinar today because of the closed captioning. I mean, there's ways of including thoughts as opposed to limiting ourselves with our thoughts. So another prescription I give is some of the adaptive thinking prior to some of the social support, engagement, and connection. All right, so I've been alluding to that this whole time. And I hope it makes sense why we want to cover these skills first. Again, it's what can you do personally to remain resilient with NF? And then what can we do interpersonally? Well, first of all, with social support, it's important to know what we mean. there's many different types of social support. Okay, so these are just a few, and you can come up with your own as well. But emotional support, this type of support makes you feel understood and accepted, no matter what you're feeling. Um, Informational support, these are people who can make it possible to learn from and find information. These might be your doctors, they may be community-based organizations. Tangible support, this is just a practical type of support where people can help you get a ride somewhere. Someone might be able to help with grocery shopping. Someone might, it's kind of like your classic, can your neighbor let you borrow an egg or a cup of sugar? Self-esteem or affirmational support, we love these people. For some people, it's their parents. For some people, it's their therapists. For some people, it's their friends. But this is the type of support that helps you feel valued, respected, um, that you have someone that you can really go to make you feel good. And that sense of belonging support, I really, I mean, this is why I've stayed so in connection with CTF is every year I go to this summit and I attend the conference and I have these opportunities to see people who maybe have never met another person with NF, and they have this opportunity to feel that sense of belonging. And this type of support that CTF offers and other organizations offer to people with rare illnesses is so important. And if there's one recommendation I could make, and I have a few others that I'll make, but it's to try and find that sense of belonging support, because it does speak to something larger than ourselves. And we can get all these different kinds of support, but that sense that you belong and that you are understood by the people around you who have similar things going on, it's huge. And in many ways, it can be a gift in this community. Questions you would ask yourself here is, what kind of support do you have available? What kinds of support do you give to others? Do you have multiple types of support available? Does the system you have in place actually work for you? Are there things where they're unequal? And all these questions um, actually leads to this exercise that we would do in the resiliency program. It's a very simple diagram. What you do is you place yourself at the middle of these circles. You can draw as many as you like, but just kind of for how it looks pretty here, we have 6 circles around us. You can place yourself at the middle of this circle, and you can draw arrows to and from different circles, and you can put the different kinds of support and even list the different kinds of, not kinds, you can list the different people who fall into those categories of support. And what you can do there is you can actually get a little bit more graphical, and you can start drawing arrows to certain circles or away from certain circles, or maybe it's going both ways. We've gotten so creative with some of our groups where, people pick different colors, or dashed lines or dotted lines mean a certain thing. But this really helps you take inventory. It gives you an opportunity to see where you may be getting more support than you realized, or giving more support than you think you're capable of doing. You might notice something that surprises you. You might see a kind of support that you need more of, or maybe an imbalance in some of those social support relationships that you have. And I think, again, if we take the spirit of what everything else we just talked about in terms of, showing up mindfully with a certain amount of calmness, relaxation, acceptance, adaptive thinking, we can look at this kind of social support, and instead of feel disappointed or discouraged or frustrated, we can just approach it with more or less a light heart and a more of a practical sense of saying, okay, so what do I need to do to help myself in this way? Because the social support is such a big piece of the experience of living with NF. Um, Again, nobody fights alone. So if you ever feel like you're alone living with NF, the next thing you need to do is get involved with a group. So this is my prescription. I don't actually get to write prescriptions, but as a psychologist, but my social prescription is this. First of all, don't recreate the wheel, okay? Find ways of getting involved. People often get in their own way when they think about making social connections. They think, oh, it's not going to be the right fit, maybe not going to feel right. I may feel blah, 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 blah. Just join a group, join an organization, get involved in fundraising events. Really, most of the challenge of any sort of social support or connection is just getting started. These organizations that are people focused tend to be quite encouraging of people joining and being volunteers and having that support. So don't get in your own way of trying to think of the perfect way of getting involved. Just find a way and get involved. This is the best first start is connecting with CTF. Uh, another one that's just really simple is just say yes. Um, it's really that simple. If you feel quite isolated or disconnected, the first time you say yes is 100% improvement over what you were doing right before that. Okay, this is a Wayne Gretzky quote, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think if you're saying no or not yet, or I should really feel better before I try and do this, you're going to miss a lot of opportunity to connect with other people. In these groups, you can find an accountability buddy. You can start initially with just getting a family member or a friend that you have involved with you. Maybe you're during this month of NF awareness, you use this toolkit and you educate one of your friends about the Children's Tumor Foundation and NF as an illness and what people can do to become more aware. And then you could branch out from there. I mean, you can get, other people in these organizations you join to keep you accountable. You can say, hey, so and so, give me a call next week and see if there's any opportunities to volunteer at that event we were talking about. Or, maybe you join a group online and you hear about something happening in your local community or online community. Maybe it's a matter of, a virtual presence, depending on what you're interested in. But the last thing, again, like don't reinvent the wheel. Obviously, if it's there, take advantage of it. A lot of these organizations have so many resources and so many passionate people, but don't give up on thinking about things that you're still looking for, right? Like it might have nothing to do with NF. It may be you've always wanted to do a pottery group or you've wanted to take ballroom dancing or, this idea of if you don't see it in the perfect form, think about starting it. If there's a specific kind of support or way of getting connected you're looking for and you don't see it, take it on as your own project. See how far it goes. And I guarantee you, because it happens every time, there will be other people just like you looking for this kind of support too. And they might not even know they want it. I mean, like, at a rehabilitation hospital for physical recovery that I work at, like nobody knew they wanted to learn how to sail after a stroke. And yet one of the volunteers was like, hey, I had this whole life as like a sailing instructor and now I want to do this. And people were ecstatic. People were so excited to have that kind of support and community. And one of my colleagues says this in couples therapy, but I think it is the same for interpersonal connection. It doesn't matter what you're doing together as long as you're doing it together. So if you want to learn how to basket weave or play mahjong or improv comedy, whatever you choose to do, as long as you're doing it with the spirit of getting connected, there's always going to be people who are willing to do that. Okay. So all these skills come from the mind body resiliency program that we developed at Mass General. There was a time where this was all virtually delivered. It was great. We had people, logging in from all across the world. And the challenge was roughly a third of people who expressed interest in those groups were not able to participate for one of a number of reasons. Could be scheduling, could be things like social isolation and appearance concerns. But being able to adapt this virtual video platform to something that was asynchronous, i.e., web based, we took this material and created NF Web. So you can QR code scan this. You're welcome to log in and watch some of those videos. They're all free. The coursework is not live, meaning that you can like take the quizzes and stuff, but there's not going to be like a teacher or a grade or anything. But which is probably quite nice for people. But so yeah, give it a scan. The NF Web platform's been around since 2021, so I think it turned 5 this year actually. Um, which means I'm 5 years younger in those videos, so don't let that surprise you. But yeah, take a look, have fun with it. If you have any questions about it, certainly CTF and the other organizations were such a great source of support for the development of this resource. And the last thing, if anybody was concerned or kind of thought that some of these skills sounded good, but felt like they had some mental health barriers that were getting in the way of even starting some of that resiliency work. There are professional mental health resources that go beyond some of that resiliency focused work. Psychology Today is a great directory for people looking to get mental health support. And what I typically tell people is don't try and find the perfect therapist who knows everything about NF. Find a generalist, find somebody who's comfortable working with low mood, depression, anxiety, life changes, extra points if they have some familiarity with medical illness adjustment. But my thought here is most people just need some kind of support and an empathic ear, and every therapist I know has that training. Hello Alma is another website that allows for that, and then the Find a Therapist is a specific CBT website. But if I had to rank order, it would be in that order. That Psychology Today is probably going to be the best place to start that directory searching for mental health care. You can filter by zip code, by insurance, by problem type, by gender of the therapist, virtual. I mean, it's a great directory. So I have a question slide here, but I'm just going to get to the many thanks to everybody who's helped me get to where I am today. And thank you to everyone here who has the interest and the effort and belief in community. It's so important that we do this work and that we do it together. So thank you. I'll stop here and have Kate come back on for us here.
Yes, thank you, Ethan.
You're welcome.
Add myself here to that spotlight. Okay. Oh, okay, good. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We did have some really great questions come through while you were speaking. So some of these came
Great.
in ahead of the webinar, and then a couple came in. So I'm going to start with our live questions since I know those folks are here,
Cool.
just in case we start to run out of time. So one of the questions was, is this idea of stress and anxiety being increased potentially in folks that are living with NF? Do we understand there to be like a biological reason for that, or a result specifically of struggling with NF? So she says, for example, if a child doesn't know much about NF, would they still be more likely to have mental health issues?
It's a great question, and I don't want to speak too far beyond what I know for certain. But when we talk about the difference between what's the general population and patients and people living with NF, um, knowledge of the illness almost doesn't matter between people who experience mental health concerns and those who don't. And um, I think for this question, anxiety and stress are kind of like bed buddies here. Like they kind of hang out in the same. If you look at what people consider stress and what people consider anxiety, there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram. And so, if your child is experiencing what looks like anxiety, it may just be stress of living with a chronic illness, or multiple follow-up appointments they're having to go to, uncertainty about all sorts of situations. So as a whole, it is true that people with NF tend to have more mental health challenges as a result of their illness.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Another great question we had is, and this is, it kind of connects to today. What I like about this question, which is, what is the best way to prepare a young child for the possible health problems that their future may hold? And what I like about it is that I think it speaks to the anxiety that many caregivers feel when it comes to that kind of process. So anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, I mean the party line for any psychologist working in, I mean, first of all, I'm not a child psychologist. So I I defer to all of my colleagues who are much better and more talented in that space. But um, the tried and true advice is that it is appropriate to share with your child specifics about the illness as long as it's developmentally appropriate. And it's a little bit of a tough line to come to on your own, but a little bit of reading. Sometimes there's these child care advocates within hospital settings. We have one at the hospital called Parenting at a Challenging Time. Um, there's other like child life specialists who can help you really frame the illness in such a way that it at that developmental level for the child it makes sense. And actually CTF has a ton of fantastic resources for that too. I mean, CTF has like comic books and superheroes, and
Oh,
for your kid to grow up with NS and think that they have a superpower, like that's amazing.
yes.
Like um, what makes us different also makes us special. And if you can embody that for your child and give them a sense of what is going on for them, because they know kids are very intuitive. They know what they feel. They just may not have the words that we have as adults to say it.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I'm just dropping in the chat a link to a webinar we did, I think a year ago so now, that is about revealing a diagnosis to a child. So, kind of in that vein, we had a nice conversation with some specialists around sort of how to talk to younger kids about their diagnosis. So, drop that in the chat for everybody if you want to check that out. I think we'll do maybe one more because we're close to time here.
Yeah, and before that question, I just want to say too, I did a quick scan and just really, I'm just so happy to see everybody saying hello to one another, and
Isn't that
thank you for
great?
the kind words on the presentation. I really enjoy doing this, so thank you.
Yeah, I know. I love that. I loved how we were seeing some examples of getting connected right here in the chat.
Yeah,
So Sarah Byrne asks, is the NF web support, is that also relevant for a parent with a child with NF1? So an unaffected parent, would that still be of use?
definitely. Just I wish I could ask a follow-up. I think the support being both, I think all of those categories. I think emotional support is going to be really important for people coping with the caregiving aspects
Yeah.
of NF, not living with NF, but living with someone who has NF.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the emotional support, but also just like the practical and tangible support, like, if you have more than one kid, the chances are that, your other child may be needing to come to some of those appointments with you, like having a friend or a grandparent or someone who can help. From the social support and connection standpoint, that's super important. From the skills standpoint, it's interesting. I was telling Kate this before the webinar, like some of these skills are so general that they would be good for just about anybody. It doesn't matter if you have NF or you don't. But where we tried to tailor and adapt those skills were just specific to what it meant for people living with NF. But honestly, skills of relaxation, mindfulness, acceptance, adaptive thinking, all of these skills are net positive for anyone with or without NF.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Ethan. I'm going to wrap us up. I do want to acknowledge we had a couple of questions come in specifically around making in-person kinds of connections within the NF community. So I want to encourage everyone, if you were here today and you were asking that question about how do I find out about events or ways to meet people in my community, I want to encourage you to send me an email. My contact information is going to be in the chat. There are a ton of activities all over the country, whether it be a walk that CTF is organizing or an educational event that's happening near you. I'm gonna do a plug for my favorite way to get connected in person in just a moment. But I want you to know I'm not ignoring that question. It's just easier to answer if we just connect, via email, and we can identify some resources for you where you're located. So
Mm.
okay, so this series happens every month. We are, however, skipping June in honor of summertime. Our next knowledge series is going to be in July, and we're going to be talking about a new resource that we're developing specifically for teens with NF1. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media so that you'll know when that's happening and you can get registered and hopefully join us for that, or maybe even get your teenager to join us for that. I really hope you enjoyed our presentation. And as I alluded to, I want to encourage you to consider marking your calendars. July 9th to the 11th is the NF Summit. This is our annual in-person gathering for families and people impacted by any form of NF or schwannomatosis. It's happening in person in Denver, Colorado this summer. It's a really fantastic opportunity to learn the latest in research and really, most importantly, to get connected with other people who are kind of on this similar journey. So I encourage you to check out the website and reach out if you have any questions about that. We're happy to hear from you. So as always, I want to say a big thank you to our presenter, Ethan Lester. Thank you so much for being here. Big thank you to everyone who attended and for your interaction in the chat. I'm so excited to see connections already happening. It's sort of, I hesitate to end the webinar, but hopefully people are getting connected. And like I said, just reach out to me. My email's in there, and I'm happy to help make introductions because I love to see that kind of stuff happening. So Thank you again.
Incredible.
And everybody just have a really wonderful day. And we'll see you in July.
I
Thank you.
sure hope so. All right,
All right.
everybody. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.